Today I am joined by Paediatric Dietitian Victoria Bittle, and we are going to discuss, as part of Live Life Well, the Cheltenham Wellbeing, the Life in Isolation series that we're now currently experiencing, what we can do from a dietitian point of view for our children. As we know, it's really important that we need a really good range of vitamins, minerals, leafy greens, but how do we do that to minimize our immunity, and what can we do in these difficult times? So Victoria, let me first of all say thank you so much for joining me today. Can you tell me a little bit more about what your day-to-day job is?
So I'm a paediatric dietitian and I currently work at Gloucester Hospital. My job involves looking after children from the ages of, zero, from birth right up to the age of 18. And we help them from all sorts of different areas. So from nutritional deficiencies, so that might be iron deficiency. We see children who are quite unwell, perhaps with cancer, who need tube feeds. So we also kind of support them in that respect. We help children with just general healthy eating advice, weight management, fussy eating, fat eating, all sorts of things really.
I mean, you've just opened up a whole range of questions I could ask you, from like, what do we do about this? I will, first of all, at this very moment in time, what can you do with your children? What is your top, say, 3 tips on what we can do to keep our children's immunity as high as possible?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think from a diet point of view, it really is just eating a wide range of foods. So we want to make sure the diet is as balanced as possible, incorporating all the main 5 food groups. So that's your carbohydrates, your proteins, fruits and vegetables, your calcium sources, and your fats and sugars as well. It's ultimately just trying to keep to normal routine. I think that's probably the hardest thing when you're at home in isolation. So trying to stick to that morning kind of breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then obviously having healthy snacks in between for the children as well. But there's no magic wand. There's no, unfortunately, vitamins and minerals that we recommend to take individually. It is just a healthy, balanced diet.
So the structure is really important to maintain, because I suppose some parents might be at home and their children are wanting attention. They're trying to work from home, so they're like, have it. And you'd say,
Yeah.
Don't do that. Stick to what they normally do.
Yeah, exactly. Try not to get into that habit, because I think it's really tricky for everybody involved. I think, stress levels are probably running a bit higher in households as well. So I think what I would probably do is stick to your normal breakfast that you'd have in the morning, and then maybe just make it your packed lunch as you normally would, and then that is actually what the kids used to. They shouldn't then be asking for anything different. And then snack wise, if they are looking for something to eat, then try and stick to your fruits and vegetables and snacks if you can.
And do you think at the moment children are going to be less active than they normally would be at school, therefore perhaps not needing so much? Or do you think with the walks, people are actually getting out more and doing more with their children?
Yeah, I don't know actually. I think I've seen a wide range of different things. I think some families have really embraced it and they've really taken advantage of that 1 hour of exercise a day. And other families perhaps haven't so much. So I think there's lots of things you can do in the house as well. It doesn't have to be outdoors. So just keeping active, using the stairs, as a source of activity to do steps. But also there's lots of activity games that you can play indoors as well. So I think it is just being mindful, making sure that every hour you're actually getting up, you're moving. Ultimately, it is difficult in some properties. Some people are stuck in small flats, etc. But I think try and make the most of the outdoors whilst we still can. I think that's probably the key message, really.
Please let it keep being sunny, hey?
I know. I hope so. I do hope so.
I mean, there is a big thing at the moment about vitamin C. What's your stand on that?
Yeah, so vitamin C. So unfortunately, there is, again, no super vitamin. There's no quick fix. I mean, at the moment, there's no evidence to say that vitamin D will prevent you. It's not going to boost your immunity to an extent where it's going to prevent you from catching the virus. But there is some small evidence to suggest that if you do become unwell, so whether that's a cold or a cough or whatever you may have, actually taking high amounts of vitamin C might help you recover quicker.
Okay.
So again, it's just ultimately looking at keeping your diet healthy. So vitamin C is something our body requires. We can't make it ourselves. We need to have it on a daily basis. And you can only get it from food. So from that respect, if we eat a wide range of different variety of foods, we should be hitting our vitamin C targets.
What are foods that are particularly high in vitamin C for children?
So vitamin C you'll typically find in fruits and vegetables. So any bright fruits and vegetables that you find. So orange typically has a really good reputation for being high in vitamin C. But actually, if you compared that to peppers, so actually green peppers, the highest vitamin C, I think they've got about 200 milligrams compared to maybe 50 grams a milligram per portion of vitamin C. You'll also find it in things like broccoli, so your green leafy vegetables, blackberries are particularly good in vitamin C. And one that's not commonly known, but actually potatoes is actually a high source of vitamin C. And embarrassingly to say, it's probably the UK's highest intake, we get from eating potatoes, chips, crisps, and things like that.
So
Yeah,
chips actually do contain vitamin C. That's
they
amazing.
do. They do, yeah. So there are some benefits from eating those foods. Yeah.
So if you've got a child that is a very, very fussy eater, and I mean, there are so many children that don't like their fruits and vegetables, how would you, from a paediatric dietitian perspective, how would you encourage parents to get them to eat more fruit and veg? Is it a case of hiding it within meals, or is there a different approach that we should be taking altogether?
I guess it depends why your child is fussy. So there's lots of different reasons. And I think sometimes hiding it is not always the best solution. But what I would say is just try and make food fun. So whether you make smoothies, so smoothies are quite fun to make, or juices, etc. So you can make that into some sort of activity, and that might encourage children to have it. I think, ultimately encouraging children to get involved in any of the activities where you're actually making food is always quite a positive thing. Making smiley faces, making flowers, making all sorts of different pictures actually out of food. So just having lots of fruits and vegetables chopped up, fruit kebabs, vegetable kebabs, they're all quite good ideas to encourage children to actually start playing with the fruit and vegetables, touching them, smelling them, and eventually perhaps tasting them. But yeah, things like orange juice, I think, drinks, typically like milkshakes, children are more likely to be prone to have, say, sort of like mango or orange or strawberries in a milkshake as opposed to having it as a actual food itself. So it is just about getting inventive, making it as fun as possible, really.
And I suppose if you're doing it as a family, like getting hands-on and doing some cookery sessions, that's a great way to bond with your children and also teach them about what they're eating. So even if they are kind of, not enjoying the food per se, but playing with it and making it might encourage them to actually like it after all.
Yeah, 100%. And also, actually, it's a really good time to start introducing goal and reward charts as well. So you could have a family goal and reward chart, and you could all pick something that you want to improve upon whilst you're in quarantine. So that might be eating more fruits and vegetables, or it might be eating less crisps, or whatever that might be. And then if you achieve that in the day, you get a sticker, and then at the end of the week, you might then have, a reward, which is maybe non-food related, that, you enjoy doing as a family. So thinking about the sort of fun things that you can do during this, tricky time, really.
That's a really good idea. Your internet, I think, is just jumping slightly. I don't know if you're connected.
Sorry.
But no, don't worry. We're still hearing some amazing advice. So with the goal and reward, would you recommend parents to also do something nutritionally based, or does it not matter at all? Is it a complete mix?
I think if you're doing it as a family, it could be whatever, really. So I think, it might be fun to sit around a sort of table and say, Dad, maybe, you need to start reading more, or you need to start watching the TV, or, and you go around and actually set goals for each other. Ultimately, the kid will probably never come up with a goal that they need to eat more fruits and vegetables. So I think it's only fair that they have an opportunity to kind of give mum and dad a challenge. So I think that's probably the best way of doing it. And yeah, like getting their favourite magazine at the end of it, or getting to watch their favourite programme, or, getting, I don't know, control of the TV for an hour, anything like that could be a good reward.
That's another thing I wanted to ask you about. Should we, because obviously at the moment we are trying to work as well, and like I said, we might be distracted, give them a biscuit. Is it wrong to reward children with food?
It's not wrong. So with food, we never like to kind of label things as right or wrong. We say everything is fine, there's no good or bad food, it's just everything in moderation. It depends what you're trying to achieve with that food. So if you're trying to get a child to lose weight, for example, then it's never a good idea to give a reward as food. Yeah, exactly. So but it might be different, that if, for example, it's a slightly different goal that you're trying to achieve, non-related to food, then I think using food could be an option. But we try and steer away from it where possible, and just try and set non-related food goals if we can. Yeah.
Okay, that's a really interesting one to take on board, because I know naturally as parents that's probably the first go-to we go to. Whereas there might be other things we can do, like you suggested, such as magazines or other
Yeah,
kind of rewards in a different fashion. So for
yeah.
children who have a particular deficiency already, what can they do in this time if they're struggling to get the foods in that have what they would normally need? So like you said, I think you said iodine. What
Yeah.
would they do?
So, I mean, it is tricky if you've got a child who's quite fussy and, you know, you go to the supermarkets and you're trying to find the foods that normally you eat and they're not there.
Mm,
I think as a general rule of thumb, if they're quite a fussy eater, typically we'll always recommend they take a multivitamin. It's a really
right.
sensible thing to do. You can go to any supermarket, I know that's one thing they've not run out of, and just buy your normal A to Z multivitamin just to cover them, just an age appropriate one. And that will just ease the pressure a little bit. But otherwise, it is just about trying to sort of find ways around it. So it kind of depends what that food is that they don't enjoy eating. And it's just trying to find like a good alternative for that, really. You know, you're always going to battle with children when, you know, with fussy eating. Any child who's even a good eater will go through phases. And I think typically stress at the moment will affect children in different ways. And a lot of us will use food as a kind of, you know, it's actually quite an emotive thing. And I think you can have a lot of power around it. So they might start refusing foods that they previously ate and enjoyed. So what I would say to the parents really is ultimately try not to get stressed about it. Just go with it at the moment, and just, you know, in some situations it is sometimes just letting that child have what they want. You know, sit down for 30 minutes. If they don't eat the food, take it away, and then offer them sort of like a fruit or yogurt as a pudding later on. But you know, it is a tricky time, and I think, yeah, like I said, stress levels are tricky, and food is often used as an emotive thing.
I didn't even think about it like that. And I suppose we may find ourselves in a situation where once we come through this, we might have a whole new generation of children that use food in a different way because they've been put in a really stressful situation. And that's
Yeah,
a really sad thing to think about, actually, that
yeah,
we, because of the world we're living in right now, children are going to be struggling, especially if they can't express themselves because of their age, how they're actually feeling, and they're using food instead. We're going to potentially be setting ourselves up with children that might have problems later on in life, which is,
yeah, potentially. I mean, you know, hopefully that won't be the case, but I think, you know, there's always going to be situations where that, you know, might impact, especially if you already do have a child with sort of underlying sort of like food issues, or, you know, unfortunately children with autism and sort of other disorders, you know, really do struggle. And I think some of these situations can just heighten all of that. So it is being mindful about it. It's kind of, again, just giving the children a little bit of space where you can. I think, you know, there's no such thing as a perfect diet with a kid anyway.
mm,
Um, so it is just about doing your best, and I think everybody is doing their best at the moment, and
oh gosh,
trying to, like,
yeah,
stick
exactly.
to the routine. Yeah. And ultimately, like we will often say to parents, we give them reassurance that, you know, you need to be with that food for a prolonged period of time to get any sort of deficiency. So I think if you can just even get a multivitamin into them, it will certainly cover them for these upcoming months that we're facing.
So the 3 points to take away so far has been, if you're struggling with your children, take a multivitamin tablet. That way you're going to get what they need into their bodies. If
Yeah,
they are particularly fussy eaters or become fussy eaters over the next few kind of days, weeks, just go with it. Give them another
go with it.
alternative. Just, it's a stressful situation.
Yeah,
We're all probably, I mean, as adults, we're all probably eating foods that we may not necessarily do normally because, frankly, we've gone to the shops and we can't find what we normally
yeah,
have. And
yeah.
deficiency, which I've learned today actually, it doesn't prevent the illness coming, but once you have something, it can help you recover quicker.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I think we're also in a situation where we've got a lot more food in the house, which we would normally
Yeah.
have, and I think that's also an unusual situation. So I think there are a few sort of challenges that we're facing which we've not really come across before. But you know, it is just being, again, just trying to stick to routine and being strict and not giving in with sort of those unhealthy snacks with your children. Just because, you know, over a 3 month period, you know, you can start new unhealthy habits which are then difficult to break. So it's trying to keep
So
that routine and structure.
evening meals. You've probably got potentially mum and dad both at home now. You can sit around the table with your children. What are an example of a few easy to cook meals that you can do with your children and then eat around the table together?
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely heaps of different things, and I think it really depends on what your budget's like as well, or what you've got in the household. But whether you're vegetarian or whether you are meat eaters, I think it's just time to sort of embrace vegetarian sorts of dishes as well at this point. So any of those pasta bakes that you can make, so you can obviously make those vegetable based, but you could also add tuna in, sweet corn to make it a sort of nice sort of non vegetarian dish. Things like chili con carne, spaghetti bolognese, any of those sorts of dishes. Again, you could use corn, or you could use normal mince, and then just bulk it up with grated carrots and courgettes. Stews, for example, like using pulses like chickpeas or beans, anything like that really. Curries like potato and spinach curries, or you can really kind of get inventive and make quite large kind of family based dishes, which again don't have to be cheap. You can batch cook as well and freeze. Potato, you can do all sorts of things like fish pies and things like that. So there's lots of nice meals that you can cook down and eat together, and I think it's actually really nice. Yeah, and it's a really nice unique opportunity as well for families to actually sit down. I think it's not something we all get the opportunity to do just with working hours, etc. So hopefully it will generate some sort of nice family discussions, and families will see children will see their parents as role models with eating these foods, and it's a nice sort of thing to do, share and eat together really. So
I mean, that's something we haven't talked about yet, actually, is it? So if you do potentially have a child struggling at the moment, if you show them how you're dealing with it, if you show them that you're eating well and looking after yourself, then that's naturally going to kind of like blend down to the child. And then naturally, at certain ages, want to emulate what their parents are doing, aren't they?
Definitely. And I think, if you have got a fussy eater that doesn't like sitting at the table, or is really quite nervous about trying new foods, and we often talk about having safe plates and having a small bowl, for example, next to their plate, which is with a new food in. So whether that might be peas or whether that might be broccoli or something, then eventually they'll get used to having that food there, and they might then start to actually touch it, play with it, smell it, and eventually taste it. So I think if you can achieve that, that's massive progress with a fussy eater. So again, just kind of encourage them to try something new on the table would be a really, really positive, good thing to do.
A lot of familiarity of just exposing yourself to it then, I suppose.
100%. And I think a lot of the time, this is the problem with children, they don't often get to see a wide range of foods, and they're not exposed to it as a family. And they get very used to sort of seeing a particular colour. So it might be that they're very prone to eating beige foods, and then they're quite nervous and reluctant to try anything that's kind of green or bright in colour. So it certainly is. It's a great time for families to be setting examples, trying to get that wide range of colours and foods on the table. Which you can absolutely do with buying frozen canned things as well. So if you're struggling to find fresh fruit and veg, which is a bit of a challenge at the moment, your frozen and your tinned variety of foods is just as good.
But it's so funny because like clothes, like I'm wearing really bright, bold clothes today. Well, not bright, but it's got patterns on. Therefore, my child's probably going to grab something a bit bright. If I was dressed in black the whole time, she might be more inclined to that. So it just translates perfectly. I don't know why sometimes the most commonsensical things don't, because you're so busy in your other life. So if we look now then at people who have got newborns, who've got young babies, they're going to be dealing with a different set of scenarios, aren't they? So with newborns, potentially they might be looking for formula milk. If they cannot get milk anywhere, what do they do?
It's a very good question. It's not something that I think we've ever come across as a society, to be honest, not actually having formula milk available. I mean, ultimately, we're always promoting breast is best, but if you're not in a situation where you can breastfeed, then obviously formula feed is your second best. To be honest, I've not heard of there being any problems with sourcing formula milk. I mean, there isn't, unfortunately, any other milks available for babies. So we can't, unfortunately, just pick up cow's milk or goat's milk or soy milk off the shelf because they don't have all the nutrients that the baby needs to grow. It's not in the right balance.
So whatever you do, don't feed your baby any other milk.
Yeah, highly. If it means, say, for example, if you've gone to a couple of shops and you can't find formula, keep going. And if worse comes to worst, contact your GP contact your local hospital, because we will always be able to get our hands on formula. But that baby needs, a required amount of things like calcium, protein, vitamins and minerals, which unfortunately you won't get in any other milk. So it's essential that they do get their hands on that formula. But powdered-based formulas are typically really easy to get your hands on. There's not been any problems with actually getting it into the UK in terms of deliveries and supply.
Okay, and when it comes to children, when you're thinking about weaning them, is it the right time to do it in a stressful environment, or does it really not make any difference?
So government suggests that we should start weaning all babies from 6 months of age, and that still stands. I would 100% be recommending not to delay weaning. There's no reason why you should have to. And actually, if you have a baby at the moment, I know it's not the easiest thing to do or to start thinking about, but think ahead and actually do start perhaps cooking up some fruits and vegetables, having things frozen in the freezer, ready in ice cubes for when your baby starts weaning. There's also lots of ready available pouches in supermarkets, which again I think the supply has generally been quite good. So it's just making sure you have a good supply of that in the house, really.
So if parents do want to go down and wean and go straight for it, what should they be looking for in the supermarkets as kind of like the top 5 vegetables, fruits that you should start weaning with?
Yeah, so there's a bit of evidence now to suggest that when we're weaning babies, we just start them with the bitter vegetables. And the reason for that is because babies have an innate sort of preference for sweet foods. So breast milk is actually quite sweet. So when you start weaning them, you'll definitely see some of those funny faces where they're kind of really wincing and looking like they're really struggling with the food that you're giving them. But it's not a bad face. We always say embrace the face. It's just them experiencing a new sensation. A new sensation with their taste buds, and what we want to do is ultimately develop that. So if you start off with fruit, you're almost just stimulating the sweet taste buds, which are already being quite well established. So we want to start with the bitter vegetables. So really good ones to start with would be things like kale, spinach.
Sounds horrible.
I know, poor kids, poor babies, kale, spinach, broccoli. So any of your like green bitter vegetables is what you want. So those would be my key sort of 3 first veggies. And then you want to go for your medium sweet fruits. So things like apples, plums, melon, those sorts of products are probably quite good to start with. And then, you're just gradually then starting to build up different fruits and vegetables. But cauliflower is a great vegetable to start with. Things like carrots, peas are, as you start getting more colourful, it gets a bit sweeter. Peas are quite a nice sort of sweet green. But I would definitely, it sounds cruel, I know, but starting off with
lovely breast milk that's just been so sweet and delicious.
Yeah.
First taste of food, no thanks, I'll just stick with that, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. But to be less mean, we do advise, we're not completely mean, but because it's quite thin purees, if you're going down the traditional weaning route, we recommend just putting a bit of breast milk with those purees or formula milk just to give it a little bit of a sweetness, so they're familiar with that taste. But it's amazing how if you do start them off with bitter vegetables, they do become, the evidence shows that they become less fussy with their eating. They have much more of a diverse, much more of a diverse sort of palate and sort of intake of fruits and vegetables as they get older, more accepting.
And are there any fruits and vegetables that we should avoid?
No, I wouldn't say there's anything particularly that we need to avoid. I think, sometimes it's just being careful about how much of the fruits and vegetables they have, because it's obviously very fibrous, so that can upset their tummies. And it can also, they've got very small stomachs, so you don't want to overfill them with it. But there's nothing, to be honest, that you need to be avoiding from a fruit and vegetable point of view.
So have a look in your supermarket, and if you can't get what you would normally go for a fruit and vegetable perspective, and you see this evil looking, like broccoli or something that's a bitter vegetable, you're doing the right thing for your baby.
Yeah, I mean, literally, there's some weird and wonderful vegetables left on the shelves at the moment, and you know what? There's no reason why you couldn't give those to your baby. It's just about being a bit inventive and playing around, but you're better off starting off with fruits and vegetables instead of going straight for protein or carbohydrate-based foods.
And what about if we jump right up to teenagers now? So how do we help our teenagers have a healthy diet when they're likely going to be feeling really overwhelmed with what's happening? They're not at school, they're hanging around the house, they can only go out for an hour or so, they can't see their mates. How do we keep them in a healthy routine, bearing in mind that teenagers are not likely to listen.
Yeah, I think it's really tricky. I mean, I think from my experience working with teenagers, I think a lot of the trouble is actually them going out and buying foods.
Yeah.
So
Can they?
exactly. So I wonder whether this actually might have a beneficial effect. I think, you know, they can't go to their local shops on the way home from school, or they can't go and get takeaways or the things that they normally would do. So I think if anything, it probably will have a beneficial effect. And also, they're probably not the ones doing the weekly shops. It's the parents that are going and doing that. So they've got more control over what their children are eating. So I think from that point of view, it probably will be beneficial.
Well, you could be really mean as parents, couldn't you? And be like, guys, done the weekly shop. Here's the broccoli.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you 100% could. I'm not sure how long they'd last in the house, but
they have to be in the house. They can't go
so true. There's no escaping it.
Yeah.
It might be an opportunity to establish some new healthy habits. But yes, I think from that side of things, you know, it might be beneficial. What I would say is that, you know, it's probably a good idea to direct teenagers to lots of different sort of healthy eating apps and sort of activity apps that might, you know, they can engage in those sorts of things. I know Change for Life is a little bit maybe babyish to some extent, but there's actually some really good stuff on there, recipe wise, and they do quite a good thing called sugar swaps and sugar checks, and you can see how much sugar you're consuming, and the similar sort of things with fat. So it's quite an interactive, fun app actually.
And it's called Change for Life.
Change for Life, yeah, which is the government sort of healthy eating family initiative.
And Change the number for life, is that right?
That's the one. Right. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Any other ones that you'd particularly recommend for teenagers?
So the NHS actually, if you go onto the NHS website and just look at general healthy eating, they do sort of direct you to different sort of websites that might be quite handy and helpful. And I know there's new apps coming out all the time. I'm not 100% on top of them all for teenagers, but it certainly would be worth just having a look on the NHS website, see what they can recommend.
And I guess exactly the same thing as we said before, get them involved with the evening cooking, with the meal plan, with the recipes. And I guess that would give them that sense of purpose and direction and a bit of adult kind of, you know, approval of them joining in, because everything must feel so swept and off their feet. You know, it's everything that they know has now changed.
Yeah, I think it's particularly hard for teenagers. I think, you know, they're so used to hanging out with their friends and doing what they want to do, and all of that's been taken away. So I appreciate, you know, it's a really tough time for them particularly. But it might be nice actually, just saying it, you could have competitions in the house and say, let's come dine with me, and each night, you know, the dad can cook and the mum can cook and then the teenager can cook. Or you can take in turns to say, do you know what we're going to do tonight? We're going to have 3 courses. We're going to do starter, main, pudding. Who wants to do what? You know, you can make it a bit of fun, or you can say who wants to be in charge of healthy snacks this week, and they can make healthy muesli bars or flapjacks, or, you know, things like that, which actually just makes it a bit more interactive and fun, really.
Interactive and empowering. And also, if there are children who are missing their friends, they can always do Zoom, can't they? And I think there's a new app, Hangout, and they could come down with me with their friends and their family. And get involved that way, and then food becomes la nourriture la vie, as the French say. Food is life. It's about that experience of sharing and just being together with family and friends.
Yeah, perfect. You know, all those sorts of things. And I think, you know, actually it's a sense of achievement, isn't it? You know, when you actually do cook something and it's gone well, I think it's kind of like, gosh, I did that, I'm quite good at this. And then you might then be inspired to do a bit more of it, and you might start getting online and looking at different recipes, and you know, it starts becoming a bit fun, and it's quite a nice hobby, isn't it, if you start baking or cooking or anything like that, really. So
it's never too soon to start, is it, or too late to start?
No,
get it at any point. Well, honestly, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much, Victoria. I guess the stuff that I've picked out has got to be, like I said before, the fact that vitamin C only is applicable really if you've got an illness and then you're trying to up your recovery. The fact that children should be having bitter vegetables when you're going to go into weaning, because it's going to help with their sweet tooths potentially not developing. And then better food choices and be less fussy eaters. The fact that we can empower our children, empower our young adults as well, to get involved with the cooking process at home to help make those healthy decisions, and to really just connect. So using food as a way to connect in a really healthy and beneficial way. So thank you so much. How can we find out more about you? Do you have a website? I know you're doing another business as well.
Yeah, I don't have a personal website, but I have a website called totstable.co.uk, which is actually looking at starting a baby food delivery service for weaning.
Amazing.
So check it out. We've been running it in Cambridge, but hopefully bringing it to Cheltenham soon. So yeah, if you're interested, do check it out to find out more.
Watch this space. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks, Lottie. Bye-bye.